welcome here on the stage our panel now, increasing bookings, new routes, more ships, cruise shipping at the crossroads between industry boom and climate neutrality. My name is Georg Ehrmann from von Beuys & Colleagues Consulting, and I have the pleasure to guide you through this really interesting panel. And first of all, I would give you warm greetings from Dieter Janicek. He's a maritime coordinator and tourism commissioner. And he had agreed to come today, but now he has to represent the minister at short notice. And so he's not able to come, but warm regards from his side. And I'm very pleased to introduce you, our participants, to the discussion. And let's start with Marie-Caroline Laurent, Directeur Général Europe at CLIA. Bonjour, Marie. Perfect. Daniel Skeldam, CEO at HX, Hurtigruten Expeditions and Hurtigruten Group. Hello. Michele Franchioni, Chief Energy Transition Officer at MSC Cruises SA. Buongiorno. And Malte Segert, Chairman at Naturschutzbund Deutschland from Hamburg. Moin. So, we talk about cruise shipping, about sustainable cruise shipping. And first of all, it would be nice if everybody of you would give us 2 minutes to represent your institution, your company. Marie, what about CLIA? What is CLIA?
So, hello everybody again. Sorry, I'm monopolizing the stage this afternoon. So, I am from CLIA, the Cruise Line International Association. We are the global voice of the cruise industry, representing 95% of all the cruise operators, not Daniel, yes, so very, voilà. But apart from Daniel, most of the other cruise operators. We are a global association, and we work on 2 main priorities, very clearly, to support the future of our cruise business. Our 2 main focus is our decarbonization agenda and supporting with regulators, with practical investment in technology, making sure that we can achieve the vision that our industry has set to have 0 emission by 2050. CLIA is an observer to IMO, so the UN agency in charge of the maritime sector. And we are actively working on the political, the regulatory level, but also on industry standards to focus on the reduction of our emission. It's not just about emission, it's about our overall environmental impact. So looking also at the reduction of our environmental impact on hotel operation, but also on land. And our second priority is indeed always focusing on this partnership with destination, making sure that we can develop together best practices for sustainable tourism, and have that partnership with destination to ensure that when we have our guests discovering the destination, they have the best condition to do this, but also to the benefit of the local population. So as a trade association, we serve as a platform for the development of best practices, but also the development of active regulation that can help and support clear investment from our industry into new technology to reach these goals.
2 minutes, perfect. Thank you. Daniel, Hurtig Expeditions and Hurtigruten. It's a bit more than only post ships, right?
Oh yes, I'm very happy to be on this panel. Since we're not a member of CLIA, we can represent the free voice in the room. Again, extremely happy to be on this topic. I think it's a super important topic for the industry to cover. I'm CEO in Hurtigruten Group and CEO in Hurtigruten Expeditions, which we renamed HX. We're the largest expedition cruise line in the world. We sail with HX to Antarctica, Galapagos, Svalbard, Greenland, a lot of exciting places on the planet. And through our Hurtigruten brand, we sail on the Norwegian coast, which we've done for 130 years. Protecting the environments that we sail in is very, very close to our hearts in both companies. We also have a big land-based operation on Svalbard, the northernmost community on the planet, where everyone is super focused on protecting this little community. And all over 3,000 employees in the group really have ESG, sustainability, and taking care of the environments we sail in extremely close to their heart. We've taken a massive investment over the last 10 years in the best technology. We've retrofitted our fleet with batteries, new engines, low emission fuels. We've advocated for a ban on heavy fuel oil, which a lot of the CLIA companies still use, 50% of the fleet, unfortunately. Which we really want to change. And the discussion about the Crossroads is really key for the entire industry. So I hope we have a good discussion here today about what this means for us as industry, because we strongly believe that unless we as an industry are taking this extremely seriously, over the next 10 years, it will impact our chances of being successful as an industry and building a lasting, successful, environmentally friendly industry.
Thanks. Michele, MSC, we don't talk about the harbor of Hamburg today, we talk about MSC Cruises. Please, who are you? What's your company on?
Absolutely, absolutely. Of course, MSC Cruises is a part of MSC Group, but as you said, today only cruises side. MSC Cruises operate today 22 large cruise vessels and one other cruise vessels under the Explorer brand. We also have comprehensive new building projects going forward. We got 8 ships on order, which will be delivered from now until 2028. So, of course, our fleet has been growing constantly since 2000 when the company was born. So today, again, as I said, we operate large cruise ship, which some of them are actually the most modern in the industry. Of course, sustainability, decarbonization are all topics that we share as a view, as a priority for our company. When we build a new ship, we always ensure that the ship is not just state-of-the-art, but something beyond that one, because we are putting ships in the market which cost some money, let's say around 1 million each, and they will last 30 years. So we design today a ship which will be delivered in 5 years, will last 30 years. So we have to make sure that one ship is suitable to meet the decarbonization targets and the net zero at 2050 that we are all aiming at. And the key for doing this one is basically build ships which are extremely energy efficiency and which are, let's say, fuel flexible. These things are, let's say, part of our strategy, and of course we look forward to continue on that. Just as a small comment on this, we were the first large cruise line to complete a net zero voyage in 2023, utilizing bio LNG on our ship.
It's not sure about that, but
large. I said large cruise ship. Large cruise ship. Anyhow, and that for us was a tremendous achievement and tremendous effort, because of course operating large cruise ship is actually require a lot of energy. So, but again, we want to make sure that this was a proof of concept and ensuring that the vessel today are ready for taking the challenge, and they got the right infrastructure for that.
Thank you. Malte, know each other for 10 years, I think. Critical partner of shipping, but with constructive critique of the shipping industry. What's with your organization? What's about you?
Yeah, I work for NABU, Germany's largest NGO with almost 1 million members. We have various issues which we address. One is transport, and one of the transport issues as well as shipping. And there we are comparatively strong. We're working on IMO level, on European level, on national level, but we also look into the ports, see what's happening there. We address a lot of the air quality issues and also that what is coming up now, the question, what will be the future fuels to meet the 2050 targets, also of the IMO. And we're looking at the cruise companies, especially. We have a ranking each year where we look which are the best ships on the market. And Hurtig Routen is actually the winner last year, was best, was best company. And it's a ranking which is very much observed in Germany, gets very much attention. So we have a questionnaire which we hand out early in the year, and then the companies have time to react, and then we have a press conference usually in June, and so we are curious actually to see who will be best in ranking in 2024. So that's the reason why we get quite some attention, but we are a good partner. We are looking critically at the industry, but we are also a partner because we want the industry to perform, because it's also a window of opportunity also, like if you then can adapt certain things also to the merchant shipping. And now the question is, who is actually faster in terms of the technology and the development? That's very interesting actually to observe at the moment, because COVID has changed actually some aspects in terms of who is faster, merchant shipping or cruise shipping, in terms of the transformation.
Well, thank you. Marie-Caroline, anyone who said in March 21 how rapidly cruise shipping is recovering and what kind of growth it is getting would probably have caused a shaking hand. What are the reasons for this growth?
And indeed, you're right to point this out. So I'm only 2 years in the industry. I joined the cruise industry indeed just 2 years ago after COVID. So I didn't live through this period, but I was indeed surprised in 2022 already after COVID to see a rapid rebound of this industry. Passenger came back quickly, and so much so that in 2023, we break our record with international passenger number. Globally, we have, at the end of 2023, around 31.5 million passengers. So breaking our record from 2019, which was our best ever year. So passenger came back. The usual cruisers, as cruisers love to cruise and repeat, but also new generation. And for us, this is really, and this is why it is so important that we clearly demonstrate our efforts and our practical actions also towards a sustainable future, because we see younger generation wanting to cruise. They're coming back. They've started cruising with their parents. They're coming back as young adults, but they're coming back also with an expectation that they can travel sustainably. So I think the success and the resilience we've shown after COVID is a testimony to the quality of the service and of the product of cruise compared to other tourism offers. It's offering the best way, we like to say the best way to see the world, but also making sure that we can match this growth and this expectation with the commitment on a sustainable development.
Thanks, Malte. What do you think if you hear that it's growing, you talk about your reports, you see the deficits, you see developments? What do you see? What are the main challenges if you hear about this growth and the augmenting figures?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge...
Just the growth, because that I cannot... 31 million is basically just the number of Greek tourists, of tourism in Greece last year. So the cruise industry, we like to think we're very big and very, very important, but we also need to put that into the bigger perception of the overall tourism number. So just before you start saying we're growing like...
Well, I mean, in the end, the industry has to decide itself if it's a good question to have over-tourism in certain destinations. And if that's up to you. And if you make it, if the industry makes it at the end not interesting anymore for the customer because there's too much tourists in Dubrovnik or in Venice or wherever, then it's actually up to you to organize that in a way that it's sustainable and that it's enjoyable for the customer. What I think is the biggest challenge is what you've said just. The ships are ordered now, they will stay in the market for 30 years, and the question what kind of engine is running and is burning what kind of fuel and how will the climate targets will be met. That is the most important question on one hand. The other question still is, for many cruise destinations, what does that mean in terms of what is coming out of the stack? Because we still have or at the moment we have actually a shift a little bit from the question what do we have in terms of air pollution towards the question what is actually relevant in terms of climate targets. And so we should not forget the question that we have still lots of cruise ships coming to cruise destinations where you still have 3-4 ships at the same time in a port, and that the air quality is still very poor. That is not only because of the cruise industry, but the cruise industry is relevant because cruise ships are usually going closer to inner cities because they're built differently from merchant shipping. So merchant ports are usually far more outside than cruise ports, or cruise ships can go into Rotterdam, but no big container ship can go into the port of Rotterdam or into the city. So you have relevant impacts of cruise shipping in the cities, and there it's relevant the question what is burned, what is coming out of the stack. Do we have onshore power supply opportunities? All these questions are really very important, not only in terms of climate targets, but also still in terms of health issues in the port cities where the people are living. And the people are not living, all of them, on the cruise shipping, but they are, up to a certain extent, suffering actually from that, what is brought into the cities. And there is a big relevance and also a big responsibility actually in the cruise ships. And if you say that the business is picking up, that a lot of money is made, and this money has to be reinvested actually into the quality of the ships to address both air pollution as well as climate issues.
Well, you talked about responsibility, and in order to classify it, I think it would certainly be important that there is no such thing as the cruise shipping industry. We talk about different kinds, and there are major differences between ships such as the Icon of the Seas, with more than 10,000 people on board, or expedition ships. And Hurtig, your smallest ship, please correct me, 145 passengers is your smallest one, and 899 passengers. So you're in another niche of cruise shipping. Perhaps you could tell a little bit, what are you doing and how is your way to sustainability?
Yeah, it's a very good input. The cruise industry is not one thing. It's a ton of different things. And our smallest ship is actually 90 beds operating on the Galapagos. And the largest ship is about 700 beds operating on the Norwegian coast in the Hurtigruten brand. I think I'm worried about the growth in the cruise industry. Pretty worried, which sounds weird because we're part of the cruise industry. But I believe in controlled growth, and I believe in a tourism industry that leaves money behind in the areas that we visit. And that's one thing that the expedition cruise industry and the small ship cruise industry is really good at, is creating value in the places we go to. And in our company, we've gone out of our way to create value. So when we visit a location, whether it's on Greenland or Northwest Passage or in Chile or Argentina, we are there to create value for that community. So we buy locally, which is a thing that we take really seriously. We develop local partners on buying food, beverage. We hire people locally. We make sure our guests are trained how to visit small communities. We make sure not to, if we have a ship with 250 guests on board, we make sure that not all of them go ashore at the same time in a community with 50 people. We ask the community in advance, how do you want to have our visit done? How can we make sure that we're leaving more behind? And that's a huge challenge for the cruise industry to tackle, because the problem with a ship with 10,000 guests is the value creation locally. And I think the cruise industry overall needs to be much more focused on generating value. If I was Barcelona or Dubrovnik, I'd say, absolutely no, I don't want your business, don't come here. I'd rather have people flying in, actually, because they will stay in hotels, they will eat in the restaurants, they will generate value locally. And unless the cruise industry, which we're part of, takes this issue really, really seriously, I don't think these ships will be welcome in ports other than perhaps Miami or Fort Lauderdale, which is like a native part of this business. If I was a Caribbean island, I'd rather go after a different kind of tourist that actually left money on the island than the stop-and-go kind of operation that we're speaking about here. So this issue really needs to be tackled, and also local emissions. There is a massive amount of local emissions from these monster ships. 10,000 people. And I think the industry, again, we're part of it, so I'm speaking as a part of it. We need to really make sure that we don't greenwash our way out of this. That we say, yeah, everything's going to be fine by 2050. LNG is great. No, it's not. It's a massive amount of methane slippage from LNG. And some of these German cruise companies have the guts to write green cruising in green letters on the side of a ship with 7,000 people on board because it's LNG. So we need to be very careful about greenwashing our way to this target. We need to take it really seriously as an industry and talk really openly about the big issues. Local emissions, local value creation, hiring local, buying local, and not buying where it's cheapest in the world and containerize it to our turnaround ports.
Daniel, but let's talk about your ship with 900 passengers. How green is it really? What engine do you use? What fuels are you using?
Not 900, 700. But how green is it? I mean, we're not saying we're a green cruise line. We're saying we take massive investments in reducing emissions. Shore power, huge investment. We did it across our entire fleet 6-7 years ago, before the infrastructure came on land. That's a big, big thing that you can turn off your engines in the ports that we need to make sure is there. We retrofit our older ships. We don't say, yeah, sure, all the new builds is going to be fine 30 years from now. We actually put batteries into older ships of the fleet. We were the first cruise line in the world to take away single-use plastics from all our ships. And we built the world's first battery hybrid power ships. So it's massive investments behind this, but I'm not going to say it's zero emissions. It's not. But we are creating a project on our Hurtigruten brand now that will be able to sail with zero emissions from 2030. That's scope 1, not 2 and 3, but scope 1. And we also signed up for science-based targets. And we report all our emissions every year to see that we get better. But it's not a green industry as of now, but we need to take those investments all the time to make sure that we're going in the right direction. And that happens now, not 30 years from now.
Okay, Michele, so you are one of those big players mentioned here now. You are the third largest cruise line in the world and the market leader in Europe, South America, the Gulf region, and South Africa. In addition, the fastest growing global company. How do you organize this, that this growth will be sustainable? And we talk about those three aspects. We talk about the engine, we talk about local pollution. Let's start with the engines, what's coming out. Main important from your point of view, from Nabu's point of view. What are your methods?
Sure. Okay, let's say that many investments are also done from ourselves. For example, shore power. Over 70% of our fleet has been shore power ready today. We've done investments for, of course, new ships. All new ships are shore power provided, but also we make retrofit of many ships. I think more than 50% of our older fleet has been retrofitted for shore power. The issue is that, unfortunately, not too many ports are ready today. I mean, that's a matter of fact. So I would say that I mentioned MSC, but I think it's valid for the entire cruise industry. Most of the cruise ships are ready, let's say, and the port are much unlucky behind. But I think we see positive improvement here, I would say, because we see in Europe at least, but not only Europe, also in the US and in some other areas where we see a growing number of ports where shore power is provided. So just, for example, last year, I think we got, like ourselves, only 45 or 50 calls. This year we'll have almost 300. Well, it's something. I say it's showing an improvement. I say we are not where Malta would like us to be, agree, but I think we are improving on that. And I recognize the fact that local pollution, to me, is an issue as important as the climate-related facts. Going on the engine, of course, as MSC, we believe that the most immediate pathway to decarbonization is LNG. We believe in that one because we know what's coming out from the funnel with LNG. The methane slip issue is an issue, but we have done our homework, as usually. And we know that the amount of methane slip that comes out from a ship is much lower than what is claimed, because we have done our own homework, and we will actually present some result just in a week time. So LNG is the most, for us, in our opinion, is the best pathways because it's a fuel that is available already today, not in this fossil form, but is also in its bioforms. And we believe that it's one of the two alternatives that is coming up in the industry, together with methanol. So we don't rule out any of them. We make sure that our ships are ready to accept almost any renewable fuels in the future. And this is our commitment to the decarbonization, ensuring that our ship will be able to utilize whatever fuel is available. That's more or less what I can say about technology. Of course, there is many other things. We are testing batteries. Actually, we are utilizing batteries, not entirely, but on for supporting the power. We are testing fuel cell. We are testing other technology, waste to energy. So there is a massive investments going on in the new ships. And of course, we start seeing the result, which will come in the next few years. But again, the big issue for us is the availability of renewable fuels. Yep. I think this is irrespectively from the size of the ship, I'm afraid.
You talk about LNG with the possibilities of dropping in with biofuel, with one-time synthetic, with CNG. What's about methanol and ammonia in your plannings?
Well, ammonia, for the time being, from our side, is ruled out, because in the sense that we don't believe ammonia is a solution in the medium short term for the cruise industry because of its toxicity, which is, again, methanol could be an issue, but if you look at the most, let's say, optimistic forecast, the amount of green methanol available at 2030 is negligible in a worldwide scenario, considering that methanol will be, of course, there will be a competition from other industry as well. So that's why this is the reason why we bet on LNG. LNG is a bit more available in a shorter term. This is the reason why. But in the long term, methanol could be an alternative. I would say these are the two alternatives, LNG and methanol, to the cruise industry right now.
Malte, you'd like to add something?
Yeah, I was just going on because you said LNG is going to be the answer for the question of decarbonization, and I was just asking myself, how can be a fossil fuel an answer to decarbonization? But then you answered like what you did. But the question will be, how honest is the cruise industry in the end really to then raise up the amount of drop-in fuels in the end until 2030, and if there will be over-compliance to that, what will be demanded in 2030? That will be 2%, but is it then 4% or is it 5%? Will you be willing to be a front runner? Actually, that is what we, up to a certain extent, expect, because there is a lot of money made in your business, and so we see you, more or less responsible also to show that it works. But then at the end there's also the question of availability, and I see it in terms of biofuels, I mean critically anyway, because there might be then another field of problems which you open up if you extend the rate of biofuels too much, and then the aviation comes too, because they want to have biofuels as well. Everybody wants to have biofuels, and then we have another problem. So that has to be taken into consideration as well, where the upscaling actually ends and where you have to think about other alternatives beyond this sector. So I'm a little, I'm probably not as positive as you are, but that's my job. I have to be critical.
Marie, and then
but it's a very fair comment, and it's not being critical. We are also very worried about the availability of this new fuel. So what do we have today? We're not imagining all of this. You have a concrete EU regulation that is in place since the 1st of January this year. All of the people on this panel are starting to pay for each ton of CO2 they emit when they operate since the 1st of January. And next year, we will have the concrete target of alternative fuels set by the European Union with FuelEU Maritime. So what do we talk about? Next year, 2025, it's 2%. 2030, it's 6%. And then I forgot, but we are basically up to 2040, where we need to reach something like between 70 and 80% of the obligation. It's not out of the goodness of our art. This is legal obligation, and our plea as part of this discussion with the European Union, but also the member states, is that The industry is committed. We have supported FuelEU Maritime. We have supported the EU ETS. So the industry sitting on this scene has been clearly supporting a pricing mechanism for CO2, which allows to actually give us that frontline runner for all the investments you've done in your ship. That gives you that advantage, and having a price to carbon is an important mechanism to incentivize that investment. But we now have this law. The question, and I absolutely agree with you, is do we get it? Where do we get it? And are governments doing what it takes to make sure we have access to it? Aviation has a similar regulation that is Refuel Aviation, where they have a fuel supplier mandate. At airports, you have an obligation to supply a certain amount of SAF. We don't have such thing in maritime. The operators are alone left to procure, to find out what these new fuels are. And now we hear the German car industry wants that biofuel as well. So I think that is a very important message for us as part of this panel, but also in general, is it's not for the operator to produce the fuel, create it and supply it. We need a very concrete mechanism, regulatory mechanism, such as contract for differences. Why all the biofuel today is bunkered in Rotterdam? Again, not because we're obsessed with Dutch, it's because the Dutch government has set out a very specific support mechanism that has biofuel supply. In Norway, we have very ambitious plan for zero emission. You have zero biofuel, you have zero biogas, you have nothing because the government just sets that zero emission target, but has put zero money to their mouth and to their objective to start that production. So I think this is really for us one of the key concern. We are doing what we can in terms of investment, which is basically technology. So it's the engine we can control and that you can buy. What we put in this engine is really the question mark.
And yeah.
Yeah, and that brings me to a good point that you're making, because what we're putting into the engines is really a question mark. Why do cruise ships sail with heavy fuel oil today? Why don't they switch to marine gas oil on the same engines and reducing emissions significantly? Well, because it costs more. That's the key component to it. It costs more. That's why they're using heavy fuel oil. LNG for the cruise industry was actually made a lot because of cost issues, because it costed less total, not from a sustainability perspective. So I think it comes down to a well-understood fact from anyone that if we are going to be able to get to zero emissions, it's going to cost more than it does today. It's going to cost more for the guests. It's going to cost more for us as operators to operate. And a lot of the companies within CLIA today can make that choice tomorrow by starting buying marine gas oil instead of heavy fuel oil. So that's an open question. Instead of speaking about LNG on our next ship and our next ship in 2030 and 2040, what I do agree with you about is that the regulators around the ocean business, around ports, need to step up the game. ETS is a good way forward. We are super supportive of ETS, but if we could get the same kind of government involvement as the aviation industry is getting, and that the governments could also put pressure on the ports to create the necessary infrastructure for shore power, for logistics around the future fuel forms, that is a key issue here. So I really hope CLIA can do a good job of promoting that message, because that is a super important message to get. Again, when we made investments on shore power on all our ships in 2016, 2017, there was only one port on the coast of Norway that could take that shore power. So we used it to pressure the government, and I think Norway is pretty far advanced on some issues, but also there you have a much better focus towards aviation on generating these supply chains of the environmentally friendly fuel for the future. So governments, ports versus the industry on all, not only cruise, but merchant navy as well, should be a key part of the toolkit. But let's not forget, a lot of ships in the cruise industry can switch to a much more environmentally friendly fuel tomorrow, but it's about cost.
Thanks that you mentioned the shore power point, because the debate regarding sustainability becomes only to the direction of CO2 reduction. When we started 10 years ago, Zeka, Eckert zones, LNG was one of the solutions to reduce the air pollution, NOx, SOx, particles, and this is still a problem in the coast near regions. It's still a problem in the port cities. And as you mentioned, there is a solution. What I ask, and you have a better overview over the world, why can't you use your power? Because you bring in those economical effects to the ports you're running to, that you say, we come back if you have the short power infrastructure. So couldn't you take agreements? Not everybody screaming the state has to do this, government has to do this. Isn't it possible to make deals with the harbors, with the ports? We only come if we could use here shore power. We are prepared. Is every ship prepared?
So globally on the fleet, we are at 47% of the vessels equipped with shore power capabilities. So reminding to everybody that the actual total cruise fleet in the world is 350 vessels. I think that's a good number, again, to keep in mind compared to the, 60,000 ships in the commercial fleet. I think it's a question, I mean, you can ask the question to an airline, will you stop going to that airport if they don't have that electrification connection? Of course not. I mean, that's part of the business development. Yep. That is, however, part of the dialogue, and there's some places across Europe where actually cruise lines are contributing, like in Marseille, where the cruise lines have been paying €2 per passengers to contribute towards the deployment of the shoreside electricity. So you see this kind of arrangements. But ultimately, this also needs to be part of the investment in the port infrastructure. So you see this kind of mechanism, this kind of partnership. To be honest, again, as of 2030, the European law says if you show up at a port, you will have to connect to shoreside electricity. And by 2035, if you don't have that shoreside electricity available, you should potentially avoid to go to that port. So I think we're getting there with clarity in terms of regulation. We need that clear legal signal. Again, you cannot just expect, and I find this crazy in this conversation on the cruise industry coming from a different sector, that we expect the cruise operator, which again has 300 ships maximum between them, to change the whole fuel supply chain, the whole port infrastructure supply chain. So there's a sense of reality to have here. But yeah, it's part of the partnership. We have now that clear legislation in Europe. I think that will help. But there's clearly also more to come also on the government side.
Malte, you made really successful campaigns against the ship owners. Does it make sense to make campaigns against harbor cities who are not able to make this infrastructure?
Well, in the end, you have to ask, where does the energy come from? I mean, you can have onshore power supply. If it comes from a coal power plant, you do not win anything in terms of climate issues. You probably have an advantage in terms of air quality. But you have to make sure that you have both, that you get it from renewable energies and that you have then addressed both issues, as I've said. So you always have to look, and I doubt that in Southern Europe it will be always and everywhere possible to get that done. So the question is, what are you looking at? And will the industry, the cruise industry critically looking at the ports and asking, where does your energy come from? In Hamburg, I can say we have renewable energy on one hand, so it's green energy and it's onshore power supply in the future at all three berths, what we have in Hamburg for the cruise industry, and we have from the 32 merchant berths, we have 8 meanwhile, almost ready for onshore power supply as well. So it's both, actually. It's not only the cruise industry, and you don't have to do this. Also, the merchant industry is addressed as well, and they have to deliver as well, for sure. But as I've said, you're going much closer into ports, and that's the reason why your responsibility in terms of the people living in ports is much bigger than that of merchant ships, because they're further out. At least in terms of air quality. In terms of climate, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter if it's outside the city or not. So I always think about that your responsibility is bigger, and that even your 350 ships have a very high impact on these 350 ports they are calling every day.
And I don't think we're disputing that. I mean, that's why we're investing in the shoreside electricity capability, and then the deployment of shoreside in the ports is indeed, again, one of our key message and priorities. So I don't think we have a problem with that. Whether the cruise industry or the shipping industry can influence the decarbonization of the whole electricity grid is another question. And I think that's why we also need to remind ourselves that you have, at least in the EU, a whole legislation to make sure that at an EU level you have an increase of renewable electricity being produced. And I think that's part of the plan. So that was the sense and the good element of being part of that Fit for 55 package. So it is not just for the maritime sector to look at the decarbonization of the electricity in Europe, but it's also part of collective efforts from states and from our whole economy to be able to provide that electricity. We're doing our bit, we're equipping the ships, we're even contributing to some of the port infrastructure deployment. I know we can go quicker, I know we can do more, we can spend more money, and I think that I'm not disputing that. But it has to also be a partnership. It cannot be just the operators are bad because they are not producing green electricity.
May I add one point? I fully agree with both Malte and Marie-Caroline. The shore power is actually addressing the local pollution. It does not address much in terms of impact on the climate, because what we spend.
If you're at berth 14 hours and you get off and you get the green energy from the grid, then you have 14 hours non-pollution of CO2. So that sounds at least reasonable.
True. But in terms of a total amount of energy, is a relatively small percentage. You have to consider that the cruise ship consume more fuel when they are running at sea. So even if we run some calculation, and from our side, if we could connect in all the ports in the world, our emission reduction, well, forget about how the renewable energy is produced, but our emission reduction will be less than 10%. Less than 10%. So it's not really, the big issue of the shore power is local pollution. And this, I think, is the key of, is really the key of the fact. Then, of course, we would love to have renewable energy available at shore power. That would be fantastic. But I would say the first initial benefit of the shore power is local emission, which is, I think, is important. And that's why we are pushing so much, because we want to make sure that when our ship call any port, this will not create any issue to the local citizen. So I think this is the first point. Second point I wanted to make, I want to go back to the decarbonization pathways. Of course, alternative fuels is key. When we choose LNG, we did not choose it for the cost. Actually, the cost of LNG is still much more expensive than HFO today, and it's been constantly more expensive for the last 3 or 4 years, and probably will be forever. But the point was, again, was a great combination of diminishing the local pollution for some ships, as well as inserting, let's say, the pathway, starting the pathway of the decarbonization, which today is with the fossil is a very limited the reduction respect to a normal fuel, but it's still something, and again gives back the pathways to the future. It's a pathways. I'm not saying it's the only one, but here to decarbonization you need 3 things, in my opinion: technology, operational efficiency, and fuels. If you miss one of the 3, the pathway to decarbonization is probably much more difficult and much more far away than what you expect.
Before we leave CO2, one last question, because Daniel, you mentioned those 10,000 passenger ships. It sounds a lot of passengers on one ship, but if I see that 10,000 people are flying to Mallorca or are flying to Greece or wherever, is the CO2 footprint of those 10,000 people really bigger than if they travel individually? Do you have figures in this to make exemptions?
I think it's about 2 things, and it's one topic we haven't really covered today, and that's overcrowding. Because what happens with a plane is, first of all, these people stay in a location a lot longer. And I think one of the big trends that we're going to see over the next decade is that people need to take fewer holidays, but longer holidays. Because of the environmental footprint that you're creating. A ship with 10,000 people discharges all of these 10,000 people into a port without much local value creation, then on board again on top of high local pollution. So I think that the value creation part and the overcrowding part is also something that we need to cover as an industry. And if I may ask, you know, I think MSC is doing a lot of good things, and I'm very happy on behalf of our company that you're on CLIA as a sensible voice. But what do you think is the largest ship that you know you can send into a port? I've seen mentioning Longyearbyen as a place of our home. That's where the company started back in the 1800s. It's a place with 2,000 people. Can you send a 10,000 bed ship into a place like that? How should that be handled? What should there be criteria from the local governments on how much you buy locally, how much you employ locally? And Bergen, their home to us on the coast of Norway, actually said we don't want more than 2 cruise ships because they don't provide any value to our local economy, and we'd rather have people come here and stay in our hotels 3 nights. So if I may ask a question to both CLIA and MSC, what's the largest size you can have in a small community?
Okay, well, again, of course, you and ourselves and yourself has got different business models, so I don't want to start arguing about your business model. Let's say I'm not so sure whether which type of industry brings more value to local communities. I think I leave it to the statistics, but I believe again we do bring quite a lot of value. I believe, Marie-Caroline, perhaps you can mention how much a cruise industry generally bring as a value, which is a significant amount of money. Of course, we had issues that has to be addressed. Of course, we are trying to work with ports and avoiding, of course, overcrowding the cities. That is a continuous effort doing what. We have good examples. We have got agreement in place in several areas. But again, it's actually a matter of working collaboratively with the ports, with the destination, and ensuring that we don't exceed or we don't impact the destination too much. That's the industry. And I think so far the industry has brought significant value in many places. Going back to Norway, to be honest, we have been engaged in the discussion, for example, on a Norwegian heritage fjords. I'm not so sure whether all the local community are unhappy if a ban to cruise industry comes into force. Actually, local communities tell us that they will be very much affected by that. So this is a good example that brings cruise industry bring benefits to local communities.
Marie, is this over-tourism really still on such a high level? Or isn't it so that there are agreements that it's in the interest of the shipping industry as well as in the harbors, at the near regions, and shipping industry it's a planning possibility? Is it still, because everybody sees the pictures of Venice with the big ships, but is it still reality? Is Dubrovnik really so crowded as everybody thinks? What's reality? How are you managing it?
No, thank you. But maybe first I just want to get our math right. If you take 100 passenger who spends, 200 euro, 400 euro per person, that's a great number. If you take 6,000 passenger who, just even if you get on the low end of our statistic, spend 60 euros per day, that is still a much bigger value creation from a big ship than what you can create. So I think instead of having this big statement, Daniel, I think we should just get our math right and just realize what we are talking about. But anyway, let's not go into the statistics. I still agree with your points about the value creation. So I think that is key. We have in a month Sea Trade in Miami, which is the global cruise industry fair. This is a massive place where you have thousands of destinations coming to attract more cruise vessels and more cruise companies. So I guess all of these people see benefit, and I see a lot of them exposing here. So I think there is value in the cruise business. I think that is demonstrated. If you want to also mention the specific case of Norway, we hear and we see smaller community that benefit from the cruise tourism because it is predictable, it is repetitive. They can base their local infrastructure investment on the fact that they actually have cruise tourists. So We have some example of cable cars in Norway that actually managed to get the investment funded because they knew over the next 2-3 years they already had the bookings for some of the cruise calls, so that allows predictability into the management of your infrastructure. And when it comes to overcrowding, it is an issue. It is an issue not just for cruise, it is an issue for the whole tourism industry. And I have to say, it's my first time at ITB. I meet every week policymakers in Barcelona, in Norway, in Greece that tell me I don't want any more tourists. And then I see ITB full of promotion of Spain and Greece and Norway. So I think this is the responsibility as a tourism industry as a whole to understand which model we want. I absolutely agree. We cannot pretend to continue sending thousands and thousands of tourists in places that cannot welcome them. There is a reality of the infrastructure. We just need to make sure, and you said we decide whether we send people to some places. We do, but there's also local authority that need to tell us how many tourists they want. And for me, Bergen is a good example. I have nothing against the Bergen system or the Dubrovnik partnership that we've put in place, where the mayor of Dubrovnik came to us to say, okay, guys, this is X number of ships per day. We have planned for it. The result of it is we have actually a better planification of the cruise calls that are more widespread throughout the season. So yes, we need to have that serious conversation. We need to have it in some of the Greek islands that are becoming not pleasant as a tourist experience because of overcrowding, not just for cruise tourists, because you have also all the ferry activities and the aviation activities that come to that. But this has to be done within the framework of a global tourism strategy. It's not just about cruise. It's about how many buses do you accept per day, how many airlines, hotels, what do you have, and have the authority deciding for their development model what they want, and then we can adapt and we can work with this.
But if you follow your math, you know, you should go to a 20,000 bed cruise ship because that would create even more value than a 10,000 bed cruise ship, right? So, which I heavily disagree with, because not only do I represent cruise ships, but we also have hotel operation and restaurants in Longyearbyen in the Arctic. And there, the people of the place didn't want the cruise ships because, again, there are 1,800 people. And they felt that the guests coming with a plane, staying longer, was just creating a lot more value. And what's happening now is that these big ships aren't welcome. So I think that instead of attacking these kind of arguments locally, which you are doing, because I've seen the delegations coming to Bergen, and also the delegations from CLIA going to Dubrovnik and Venice, instead of attacking it, why don't you talk with the local communities on how you generate value? Perhaps you start buying onto these ships from local breweries, from local food suppliers. Perhaps you give yourself a target that, you know, at least 20% should be bought on the location, that you hire from the location to work on board the ships. I think that's a better direction, talking from the destination perspective as well, that would make the cruise guests more welcome. And what we say in our industry, and I can talk for all the expedition cruise companies, is that a good place to visit is a good place to live. So we need to take over responsibility on making it a good place to live, because then it gets a better place to visit for our guests as well. And you avoid these hay balls in Norway where they painted cruise guests go home because they're not welcome there. I don't think that's a good place to come as well from a cruise guest perspective.
Malte, last point.
Yeah, no, actually, I have nothing to add. He did a better job than I did. So actually, I mean, I wonder whom he's working for. That's very good, actually. No, that's absolutely true, because I think it's a big responsibility, and you really have to see as an industry where you will be going. And I share that point of view, that it's a difference between coming in by plane and using the local infrastructure, or coming in with a ship where you have the infrastructure already on board, which you are using because you have been paying for it already. So nobody actually, or hardly anybody, is going out into a city and really spending a lot of money. And there are studies which show that a regular cruise tourist is spending less than a backpacker. And it's clear why that is, because you have already paid your share on board of the ship, and that's the reason why you don't tend to spend a lot within the cities, except some small touristic things you buy. And I think that is also a chance in the end to make it more interesting and profitable for the cities to say, let's find better arrangement, is if all the people are in the end having a benefit out of it, and not only the cruise industry itself.
Well, thank you, everybody. We have to keep in mind that cruise shipping accounts for only 0.8% of the global shipping and accounting for only 2% of international travel. However, the industry is going on, and I think this debate shows that it's not only greenwashing, that you're on a path, but it's a long path to go. And my last round, and I would ask you to complete my sentence. Marie-Caroline, cruise shipping in 2040 will be
sustainable. That's what we're talking about. Well, that's what we will be, not quite zero, because we will not be there yet, but we will be towards reaching our target.
Okay, Daniel, if other countries on our routes follow the strict Norwegian rules for fjords, that means for us?
It means that the cruise industry is a much better industry because they're forced into following local regulations on behalf of the destinations they visit, and it's just a much better place for everyone. The locals, the industry, the future of the industry, the operators, and the guests.
This was one of the longest sentences I ever heard. Perfect. And Michele, if MSC is the largest provider of cruises, this means for the environment?
That our commitment toward the environment will continue to be very strong, and we'll do whatever is in our hands to ensure that the cruise industry in 2040 will be much better than what it is today.
Perfect. Malte, I will make holiday with my family on a cruise ship if
it's completely electrified, absolutely zero emission, and if it's a small ship, because I detest spending my time on a spot where it's too crowded.
So, thank you, everybody. Thanks, end of the panel, and have a nice evening. Thanks, everybody.